I never thought I'd be the kind of person pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. But here I am. I'm not even sure why I'm writing this. Maybe to vent, maybe to find some clarity, or maybe because I'm just lost. Either way, I need to get this story out. I feel like my entire life has been turned upside down in the span of a single night. Val and I have been married for 8 years. 8 years of sharing a home, a life, and what I thought was mutual trust. We met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was smart, funny, and had this smile that could light up the darkest room. I was smitten almost immediately. We had a whirlwind romance, got married a year later, and started building our life together. For years, I thought we were rock solid. Sure, the honeymoon phase faded after a while, and we settled into the routine of work, bills, and occasional date nights. But isn't that what happens to everyone? Relationships evolve. I thought ours had simply matured into something comfortable and dependable. The cracks were subtle, so subtle that I didn't even notice them at first. Lately, Val had seemed a little distant. She still smiled, still laughed at my jokes, and still kissed me goodnight, but there was a weight to her I couldn't quite put my finger on. I chalked it up to stress. Work had been insane for both of us, and we were overdue for a vacation. We talked about getting away, maybe heading to the mountains for a weekend, but life kept getting in the way. Once things calmed down, we kept saying, like some magical moment of calm would suddenly arrive. Then there was Cole, my best friend since college. The guy who knew all my secrets, who'd been there through every high and low of my adult life. We were roommates back in the day, partners in crime during our wild youth, and now, as we approached our late 30s, still as close as brothers. He was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and have everyone laughing within minutes. Charismatic, good-looking, and utterly dependable, or so I thought. Last night was supposed to be a celebration of Cole. His birthday, his day to be the center of attention. I'd planned a small, intimate dinner with just our closest friends at his favorite restaurant. Val had been unusually enthusiastic about the whole thing, even going out of her way to pick up his favorite whiskey as a gift. "He'll love it," she'd said with a grin, her eyes lighting up in a way that made me feel warm inside. I was proud of her, proud of us, proud of the life we'd built with these incredible people around us. The evening started perfectly. The food was fantastic, the conversation lively, and the drinks flowing freely. Cole was in his element, cracking jokes and regaling us with stories from our college days. Val was right there beside me, laughing along and occasionally teasing me about my youthful antics. It was one of those moments where everything feels right, where you look around and think, this is what life is all about. But then came the moment that changed everything. Cole excused himself to use the restroom. It wasn't unusual. We'd all been drinking after all. A few minutes later, Val got up too. "I need to freshen up," she said casually, brushing a hand across my shoulder as she stood. I nodded, distracted by a story one of our friends was telling, and didn't think twice about it. Why would I? She was my wife, and I trusted her implicitly. The minutes ticked by. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. I glanced toward the restrooms, a slight unease settling in my chest. It wasn't like I was suspicious, more curious, really. Val wasn't the type to linger in the bathroom, and Cole wasn't the type to spend forever away from the party. Then someone at the table, a little tipsy and clearly in a playful mood, made a comment that hit me like a sucker punch. "Hey, Phil," they said with a smirk, "you might want to check if Cole and Val got lost in there together." The table erupted in laughter. I laughed too, though it came out more like a nervous chuckle. It was a joke, just a dumb, harmless joke, but it planted a seed in my mind that I couldn't shake. My gut twisted, and for the first time that evening, I felt genuinely uneasy. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous. But as the minutes stretched on and neither of them returned, that uneasy feeling grew. My mind started racing, flashing back to every moment Val and Cole had interacted that evening. The way she'd laughed a little too hard at one of his jokes. The way he'd leaned in a little closer than necessary to show her something on his phone. Were those normal, innocent moments between friends? Or had I missed something more? I couldn't sit still anymore. My heart was pounding as I stood up, mumbling something about checking on the bill. No one questioned it, and I made my way toward the restrooms, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway leading to the bathrooms was dimly lit and quiet, a stark contrast to the lively restaurant behind me. My palms were sweating, my stomach churning, and my mind was screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to know. When I reached the restrooms, I paused outside the door, suddenly unsure of what I was doing. What was I expecting to find? What was I even looking for? I felt foolish, standing there like some paranoid husband. But then I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. Muffled voices, low and indistinct, coming from inside the men's room. One voice was distinctly female. My breath caught in my throat. A million thoughts raced through my mind, each more horrifying than the last. I pressed my ear closer to the door, straining to hear, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The voices stopped, replaced by the unmistakable sound of movement. My hands were trembling as I stepped back, staring at the door as if it held all the answers I didn't want to know. The seconds stretched like hours as I stood there, staring at the restroom door. My mind raced, a chaotic swirl of fear, doubt, and an almost desperate hope that I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't Val. Maybe it wasn't Cole. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions because of a stupid joke and a restless gut. But then I heard it again. Muffled voices. Laughter. Hers. I would have recognized Val's laugh anywhere. It was etched into my memory like a favorite song. Only now, instead of filling me with warmth, it sent a cold shiver down my spine. I didn't know what to do. Should I barge in? Wait for them to come out? I felt frozen, caught between a need to confront whatever was happening and a desperate wish to rewind time to 10 minutes ago when everything still felt normal. Before I could decide, the lock on one of the stalls clicked. The door creaked open, and I felt my heart stop. Val stepped out first. Her hair was slightly disheveled, a few strands falling out of the careful updo she'd worn to dinner. Her lipstick was smudged, and she avoided looking up, her gaze fixed on the floor as she adjusted her dress. Behind her, Cole emerged, his face pale and tense, his shirt untucked and wrinkled. He didn't meet my eyes, either. He didn't have to. The guilt was written all over his face. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to grip the wall to steady myself. My brain was struggling to catch up, to process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I kept waiting to wake up, to shake off this nightmare and find myself back at the table, laughing with my friends. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was my reality. Val finally looked up and froze when she saw me. Her eyes widened in shock, and her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. For a moment, the three of us stood there in a heavy, suffocating silence. It was Cole who broke it first, mumbling something about too much to drink and brushing past me, as if escaping the scene would somehow erase what had just happened. I turned my attention back to Val. She was still standing there, frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights. I could see the panic in her eyes, the frantic calculation as she tried to figure out what to say. "Phil," she started, her voice trembling. "This isn't what it looks like." Classic. The oldest cliché in the book, and yet she had the nerve to say it. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. "What it looks like?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're kidding, right?" She took a step closer, reaching out as if to touch me, but I flinched away. Her hand dropped to her side, and tears welled up in her eyes. "It was a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't even know what I was thinking. Please, Phil, just let me explain." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A mistake? She didn't know what she was thinking? How do you accidentally end up in a bathroom stall with someone who's supposed to be your husband's best friend? I shook my head, the weight of the betrayal crashing down on me all at once. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper now. Don't try to explain this away. There's nothing you can say that'll make this okay. She started crying then, her sobs quiet but uncontrollable. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to wipe away her tears and tell her everything would be fine. But another part of me, a bigger, louder part, was screaming at me not to fall for it. Not this time. I turned and walked out of the restroom, my hands shaking as I made my way back to the table. The room felt unbearably loud, the laughter and chatter of our friends grating against my nerves. I couldn't sit back down. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. One of my friends, James, must have noticed something was off because he followed me outside. "Hey, man," he said, his voice filled with concern. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated, not sure how much to say, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. "Val and Cole," I said, my voice raw. "I caught them in the bathroom." James's face fell, and for a moment, I thought he might be sick. He glanced back toward the restaurant and then back at me, his expression a mix of pity and guilt. "Phil, I don't know how to say this," he started, his voice low, "but this isn't the first time I've noticed something weird between them. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe I was imagining it." His words hit me like a second blow to the chest. Not the first time? How long had this been going on? How many times had I been the oblivious idiot, laughing with them, trusting them, while they betrayed me behind my back? I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, and I needed to get out of there. "I need some air," I muttered, brushing past James and heading for the parking lot. I didn't stop until I reached my car, leaning against it as I tried to steady my racing heart. The cold night air stung my face, but it wasn't enough to numb the pain. Sitting in the car, I stared blankly at the steering wheel, my thoughts racing but making no sense. Betrayal clung to me like a heavy fog. I wanted to drive away, to leave it all behind, but I couldn't. My life, my wife, was inside that restaurant, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of either. I don't know how long I sat there before I saw Val step outside. She was scanning the parking lot, her face pale and tear-streaked, her movements hesitant, almost timid. When her eyes landed on me, she froze for a moment before walking over. I stayed in the car, the weight of her approaching presence pressing down on me like a boulder. She tapped on the window, her knuckles barely making a sound. Reluctantly, I rolled it down. "Phil," she began, her voice soft, pleading. "Can we talk? Please." I didn't respond at first. My anger and hurt had tangled together, creating a storm I didn't know how to navigate. Finally, I pushed the car door open, stepping out to face her. "Talk about what, Val?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely restrained emotion. "What could you possibly say right now that would make this better?" She flinched at my words, tears pooling in her eyes. I didn't mean for this to happen," she stammered. "It was stupid and selfish, and I don't even know how it got to this point. But I love you, Phil. I do. Please believe that." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound foreign to my own ears. "Love me? You love me, but you're sneaking around with my best friend? In a bathroom? No less? Explain to me how that works, Val, because I'm not seeing it." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the rejection making her flinch again. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I let things get out of hand, but it didn't mean anything. It was stupid. Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You expect me to believe that? You're telling me you risked our marriage, our entire life together, for something that didn't mean anything?" She started crying then, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly swallowed by my own pain. Her tears felt like salt on a wound that was already gaping. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, my voice quieter now, more controlled but no less cutting. "You didn't just betray me. You destroyed the one friendship I thought I could count on. Cole was like a brother to me. And now, I don't even know who he is or who you are." Val's sobs grew louder, and she started to say something, but I held up a hand to stop her. I don't want your excuses, I said. I want the truth. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything I needed to know. Val, I said sharply, how long? 3 months, she finally whispered, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear her. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 3 months. 90 days of lying, sneaking, and betrayal. 90 days of me playing the fool while they carried on right under my nose. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why anyone? I don't know, she said, shaking her head. I was feeling lost, I guess. Unhappy. And Cole, he was there. He understood me in ways I felt like he didn't anymore. Her words stung more than I cared to admit. So instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix whatever was wrong, you turned to him? I asked, my voice heavy with disbelief. You didn't even give me a chance. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said again, her voice desperate. It just did. I stepped back, running a hand through my hair as I tried to process everything. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought I had, it all felt like a lie. Do you even regret it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Of course I do, she said, her tone urgent. I hate myself for what I've done, for hurting you. I love you, Phil. I don't want to lose you. I looked at her, searching her tear-streaked face for something. Truth, regret, anything that could make sense of this mess. But all I saw was a woman who had made a choice, and that choice had shattered everything we'd built. Love isn't enough, I said finally. Not anymore. I turned and walked back toward the restaurant, not because I wanted to go inside, but because I needed space. I needed air. Val didn't follow me this time, and for that, I was grateful. But as I reached the door, I saw someone standing nearby, James. He looked hesitant, almost as if he wasn't sure whether to approach me. Hey, he said quietly. You okay? I shook my head, unable to form the words. He hesitated, then said, Phil, there's something you should know. About Cole and Val. I've seen them together before. Not like this exactly, but there were signs. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to believe it, and I didn't know how you'd react. I'm sorry, man. His words confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a pattern, a betrayal that had been going on for months right under my nose. Thanks, I said, my voice hollow. But I don't think I can hear any more tonight. James nodded, his expression sympathetic. If you need anything, let me know, he said before heading back inside. I stood there alone, the cool night air biting at my skin, and for the first time, I truly felt the weight of what had happened. My wife had betrayed me. My best friend had betrayed me. And I was left picking up the pieces, wondering if there was anything left to salvage. When I finally drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. Val sat in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her head bowed. She didn't say a word, and neither did I. What was there to say? Everything that mattered had already been shattered, lying in pieces we didn't know how to pick up. I slept on the couch that night, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't imagine lying beside her, pretending even for a second that things were normal. She came down at one point, her face swollen from crying, and tried to talk to me. Phil, she whispered, her voice tentative, can we please just start somewhere? I'm so sorry, but I couldn't. I told her I needed space, and she finally went back upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Or maybe it was the other way around. My thoughts wouldn't leave me alone. The hours dragged by, the nights stretching into eternity as I replayed everything in my head. Every laugh Val and Cole had shared, every time they'd lean a little too close, every moment I'd shrugged off as innocent. I felt like a fool. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind? I trusted her. I trusted both of them. And they'd taken that trust, twisted it, and thrown it back in my face. It wasn't just the act itself. It was the months of deceit, the lies they'd fed me while smiling in my face. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Val moving around the kitchen. The smell of coffee wafted into the living room, but it didn't bring the comfort it usually did. I sat up, rubbing the stiffness out of my neck, and stared at the wall. I wasn't ready to face her, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. She was standing by the counter when I walked in, her hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Morning," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. For a moment, we just stood there, the air between us thick with everything left unsaid. Finally, she broke the silence. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "But I want to try. I want to make this right. Make it right." I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "How exactly do you plan to do that, Val? Because I don't think there's a fix for what you did." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't let myself feel sympathy for her. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice breaking. "Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. I don't want to lose you." I wanted to believe her. A part of me, the part that still remembered the woman I fell in love with, wanted to take her in my arms and tell her we'd figure it out. But the other part, the part drowning in anger and pain, couldn't see a way forward. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to think, time to figure out what I want. Right now, I can't even look at you without seeing him." She nodded, her tears spilling over. "Take all the time you need," she said. "Just please don't give up on us." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my keys and left, needing to get away from the suffocating tension of our home. I ended up at a park near our house, sitting on a bench and staring out at the empty playground. The stillness around me was a stark contrast to the chaos inside my head. The grief hit me in waves. At first, it was pure, white-hot anger. How could they do this to me? How could two people I loved and trusted so deeply betray me in such a cruel, thoughtless way? But the anger gave way to sadness, a deep, aching sadness that felt like it would swallow me whole. I'd lost so much in one night: my wife, my best friend, the life I thought I had. How do you come back from something like that? I sat there for hours, cycling through every emotion I'd ever felt until I was too exhausted to feel anything at all. By the time I went home, I was numb, my body moving on autopilot as I went through the motions of the day. Val tried to talk to me again, but I brushed her off, retreating to the bedroom and locking the door. I wasn't ready to face her. I didn't know if I ever would be. Over the next few days, the numbness became my constant companion. I went to work, ran errands, and did everything I was supposed to do, but it all felt hollow. I avoided Val as much as possible, and when I couldn't, our interactions were stilted and tense. She tried to apologize, tried to explain, but I shut her down every time. I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't sure I ever would be. At night, when the house was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, the pain crept back in. I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in my head. I kept wondering if there was something I could have done differently, something I could have said or noticed that would have prevented this. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my fault. This was their choice, their betrayal. I was just the collateral damage. The days that followed felt like an endless blur of numbness, broken only by moments of sharp, unbearable clarity. I'd find myself going through the motions of everyday life, showering, working, eating, only to be suddenly hit by the reality of what had happened. My wife had betrayed me. My best friend had betrayed me, and I had no idea how to move forward. Val continued her attempts to reach me. She wrote me letters, left notes on the fridge, and texted me throughout the day, begging for a chance to explain, to make amends. I ignored most of it. I wasn't ready to engage. Every time I thought about her, about Cole, about the two of them together, the anger boiled up again, eclipsing everything else. One night, about a week after the dinner, I found myself staring at one of her notes. It was simple, just a piece of paper she'd left on the kitchen counter. Asterisk Phil, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm not giving up on us. Please let me show you how much I love you. Asterisk. I crumpled it up without reading the rest, but the words stayed with me. Did I want to forgive her? Did I want to even try? The truth was I didn't know. Part of me still loved her. How could I not? After 8 years? But another part of me, the part still raw and bleeding from her betrayal, wanted nothing more than to walk away and never look back. I felt torn in half, caught between the life we'd built together and the wreckage she'd made of it. It wasn't until a few days later that I finally made a decision. I'd gone for a drive, hoping the open road would clear my head, and ended up at a small coffee shop miles away from home. As I sat there, sipping my coffee and staring out the window, I realized something. I couldn't keep living in limbo. I needed to make a choice for my own sanity, if nothing else. That night, I told Val we needed to talk. She looked hopeful when I said it, her eyes lighting up in a way that made my heart ache. I'm ready to listen, I said, my voice steady but firm. But I'm not making any promises. She nodded, tears already streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance. What followed was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Val laid everything bare, confessing to the full extent of her affair with Cole. It had started, she said, as a few harmless texts, inside jokes, little compliments, nothing serious. But over time, the line between friendship and something more had blurred. She'd felt lonely, disconnected, and Cole had filled a void she didn't even realize was there. I'm not excusing what I did, she said, her voice shaking. I made terrible choices, and I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to comprehend. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us? Please, Phil, tell me what I can do. I sat there, letting her words wash over me, feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and something that felt almost like relief. She was owning up to her mistakes, not trying to justify them or shift the blame. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it was something. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice raw. And even if I can, I don't know if I'll ever trust you again. I'll earn it, she said immediately. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'll do it. Just please don't give up on us. I told her I needed time, and she agreed to give me as much as I needed. But in the days that followed, I started to wonder if time would be enough. The betrayal had left a scar, one that wouldn't fade easily. And then there was Cole. Even if Val and I managed to rebuild our marriage, how could I ever trust another friendship again? Eventually, I made a decision. I told Val I wanted to separate, at least for a while. I needed space to figure out what I wanted, who I wanted to be, and whether I could see a future with her. She was devastated, but she understood. I'll wait, she said. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait. As for Cole, I haven't spoken to him since that night. He's tried to reach out, sending me long, apologetic texts and even showing up at my office once, but I refuse to engage. Our friendship is over. There's no coming back from what he did, and I don't think I'll ever forgive him. Now, a few weeks later, I'm still trying to put the pieces of my life back together. Some days are better than others. There are moments when I feel almost normal, like I might actually be okay. But then there are moments when the pain hits me all over again, and it feels like I'm right back in that restaurant, hearing Val's laugh from behind the restroom door. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that trust is fragile. It takes years to build and seconds to destroy. I don't know what the future holds for me and Val, but I do know this. I deserve someone who values me enough to never take my trust for granted. Whether that's her or someone else, only time will tell. I want to ask, how do you rebuild trust after something like this? Can you ever truly move past it? Or is it better to cut your losses and start over?